Good morning, everyone. So I've been creating content for a little over a year now. Holy bright sun. And in that time, I've used several different cameras to vlog and create this content with. Today, I wanted to talk about 3 of those cameras and their positives and negatives, and which one is my favorite camera to vlog with. So let's get into it. Alright, so let's talk about the camera I am filming on right this instant, the DJI Action 1. So this is the first Osmo Action camera that they created. First off, this camera is small, compact, very lightweight, and it has multiple uses. So I can sit here and put this up on my car as I'm driving. I can throw it on a motorbike. I can take it underwater. It's really usable in that sense. And because it's so light, I can easily take it wherever I'm going and just throw it into a little section of a bag or whatever and not have to really think about how much space this is taking up. The other thing that you guys are seeing right now is the wide angle on this thing is super wide. I am holding this about 6-7 inches away from my face right now, and it's getting everything in. So I don't have to really worry about what is in frame because it's probably going to be in frame. This thing is fully kitted out right now, fully rigged out. Even with that, even with this heavy frame on, even with this microphone, the ND filter, and this extendable tripod, even with all of these things, this camera is super lightweight. My arm's not gonna get tired as easily, not going to be really that much of an issue to worry about. Next thing, these things are super cheap used right now. I think I last saw it at like $150 for a camera on MPB. You can get them super cheap, and the accessories are very cheap as well. So again, you're not spending a lot of money to get something that I think would be a great camera to start off with. So not only does this do, I believe, 240 in 1080p, but this does go up to 4K 60 frames a second with a changeable shutter speed, which is going to help you get a lot better looking footage, even though right now it's not looking the best. Thank you, sun. So you can get a lot better footage because of the changeable shutter speed and 4K 60 to slow it down quite a bit actually, which will help get that nice looking slow-mo footage even just starting out. And finally, this thing is waterproof. Now in the configuration I have it set up in, I would not put it underwater because of the microphone, but I am still not worried about it coming out if it's raining. So if it's starting to rain, I am not rushing to put this camera back because I know it's going to be fine even with this mic in. It's just a beast of a camera. It can go underwater even, so when you do have that little flap on, it's not gonna make a difference. All right, we're gonna see how well this works when the sun is to my back. But let's talk about some negatives of the Action 1. This thing has a tiny little sensor, so if it starts to go to dusk, it's time to put the camera away. I have filmed in some fairly dark situations, but the sun was still technically up, and this camera did not like that one bit. So what I have found is the highest I am willing to go before it gets too noisy is roughly about 800 ISO. Not really my cup of tea past that point. It gets too grainy, too dark, not really great footage. The next thing is still that wide angle lens. Now, even though that was a positive, it's also a negative because it is not interchangeable. So you get this one view and this one view only. You want to make B-roll footage, if you get too close to get it framed up nice, it is out of focus. That's a tough one to get wrapped around. Now, because this sensor is so tiny and the lens is so wide, there really is no background separation. As you can see behind me, you can see everything behind me. And some people may not like it. I think just starting out, I think it's perfectly acceptable as long as you're not showing anything too rough back there. Another thing that I'm not super fond of is this thing gets over sharpened. So it is very sharp and it almost looks digitally sharp, like just kind of that gross sharpness. Another issue that I have, there's not a lot of filters outside of the ND filter. So the ND filters that they have, there's a lot of, but you don't really get the option for like a black pro mist or like a glimmer glass or something like that. So you'd have to kind of step up, and I have found some issues with that. So I tend not to use that. And finally, my fat fingers make it hard to change the SD card. It's a micro SD and you have to push it in. If you have nails, I think it's not going to be that much of an issue, but I don't, and that's just a negative for me. All right, now it's time for the DJI Pocket 2 camera, which I really enjoy. So I'm shooting on that right now. So for the positives, this thing is small and compact, just like the Osmo Action camera, but I feel like this is even smaller because I don't have to have a selfie stick to make this work. It kind of is its own selfie stick. So that makes it very easy to just throw into the pocket and work for me. Number two, again, this has the changeable shutter speed as well as a 4K 60 mode. Now I believe this only, I don't think this goes up as high as the Action 1 camera for the slow motion, but it's still very usable. I believe it's 120 is what the 1080p goes up to. This is going to be kind of a nice combination of things, but this camera is cheap. Along with its accessories, a lot of them have come down in price because of the Pocket 3 coming out. So now people are trying to offload these accessories and these cameras because they don't want them sitting in stock. Even when rigged out, like I've got my microphone on, I've got this little mount on. Even when rigged out, this thing is super light. Again, this is not really affecting me holding it and making sure that everything's in frame, so it's really nice to use. The thing that I think I like the most about this camera is the built-in gimbal. So even with me walking, the footage is very smooth and nice to use because of the gimbal. So it's doing all the heavy lifting for me, so I can just focus on what I'm talking about and where I'm going. Finally, this has a little bit more of the zoomed in lens. This is a 24mm equivalent, which is one of my favorite focal lengths right now to use. So yes, I do have to hold it a little bit farther away, but it does come with a wide angle adapter, and if you get the Freewell wide angle adapter, you can even put ND filters in that one, which brings you to an 18mm equivalent, I believe. But that way you can get that wide angle field of view and get everything in frame. All right, so we talked about the positives. Let's talk about the negatives of this camera. I do not trust this in the rain at all. It is not even water resistant, not waterproof, nothing. So if it does start to rain, I have to quickly put this in my pocket, put this in my bag, and get it out of the rain ASAP. The other thing is this has a very tiny screen. So if you don't have it hooked up to your phone, it's very hard to see and make sure everything is framed correctly and focused correctly. Another thing that I have a lot of concerns with, I haven't had many issues with it, but concerns still all the same, is this thing gets very hot while filming. So down here in Florida, that can be an issue. I've never had it overheat on me, but it has been very hot to the touch after filming some footage. So just keep that in mind if getting this camera. As with the Osmo Action camera, this thing really has no background separation. You can see everything going on behind me. It's got that small little sensor, and there's really no bokeh going on at all. Everything's in focus because it kind of has to be. Another thing that it is it's over sharpened as well. So there are many cases where I wish I had some sort of glimmer glass or mist filter, and it just doesn't happen. So because this camera is so small, it is a lot harder to change out the ND filters because they are tiny. Yes, they're magnetic, but they are so small that my fat fingers like to drop them, and I have to go on a little scavenger hunt to look for them on the ground. Not a huge fan of it. Not good in low light because of that little sensor. And finally, probably my biggest gripe with this camera, and I understand why it's done the way it is, but it's still a gripe nonetheless, and that is no interchangeable battery. So what I have is what I have. Now, I know it can charge off of a USB-C battery charger, you know, portable battery, wall charger, anything. But because of how hot it gets, I don't necessarily trust filming and charging the battery off of a battery bank while I'm out in the field. I think it gets too hot for that, and I would not trust the camera to be able to keep up with that. All right, so this is the first time that I'm filming with this camera. This is the Panasonic Lumix G9, and I'm very excited to have this camera. So let's go ahead and get into the Panasonic positives. So this camera is going to have a little bit bigger of a sensor, so it's going to be a little bit better in low light. That also has a lot of additional benefits because of background separation. More light can be let in, so I can film a little bit later at night with this camera. This camera also has interchangeable lens in the Micro Four Thirds lineup, so I can get what I'm filming on right now, the 9mm f1.7 lens from Leica, or I can go for a 24mm f1.4 from Leica. Any one of those or 100 more. So I can really tune my camera to what I'm going to be shooting with or shooting for and what I really need for that said project. This thing does 4K 60 as well. So all of my cameras that I use to film with does 4K 60, which is a great additional thing so I can go out there, film some slow-mo and get some really great footage. This thing also does 1080p. This also does 180 frames a second, which is phenomenal. So I can get super slow-mo if I do it that way. And the benefit with this as well is that it has a great IBIS in it. So this is going to look a lot smoother than the average camera, even though I'm walking on it. This has 2 SD card slots. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually filming to both of them. So I'm having a backup filming going on right now, just in case one of them fails, which is super nice to have, and it gives me a lot of peace of mind. This thing takes amazing photos, and I haven't really gone out and taken a lot yet, but that will be happening in the very near future because, like I said, I got this to create content with. The other thing, in comparison to the other 2 cameras, this camera has excellent battery life. I can film a lot longer with this and not have to worry about when the battery's going to die. All right, let's get into the negatives of the G9. So, first off, I have been changing my arms because this thing is heavy. It is big, bulky, noticeable, brings attention to you. So if you're not really somebody that wants to have attention drawn to you while you're vlogging, this might not be a good camera for you. And that kind of goes for all interchangeable lens mirrorless cameras. They're all pretty big and bulky, whereas like the Pocket 2 or the Action camera, very small, and they feel a little bit more comfortable for me when vlogging in public. This thing costs a lot more than what the Pocket 2 and the Action camera do right now. Although this does have a really good price tag on it, especially going through MPB. As I said, this is much more noticeable out in public. People will look at you and wonder what you're doing because it is this big camera on this extendable selfie screen. But I mean, what can you do? Like it's just a lot more noticeable of a camera since you're filming with it. Another thing, these SD cards cost a whole lot more, especially if you're going with ones that are rated for this camera, which are UHS-2 SD cards, excuse me. UHS-2 cards are much faster, but they also cost a lot more. And finally, these files are a lot larger than what the Pocket 2 and the Action 1 have. So these files can be a lot harder for some computers to edit. I don't have that issue because my computer is upgraded, but the issue still stands. They can be a lot harder to edit. All right, so overall, these cameras are fantastic. No matter which way you go, whether you go with a G9 or a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera, or the Pocket 2 or the Osmo Action 1, no matter where you go, these cameras will do exactly what you need them to and will produce great videos for you. These are excellent cameras and will provide that content for you. They will look great. But with everything considered, all of the issues that I have with all of these cameras, I still think this has been my go-to over the last year. This has been my favorite camera, which is the DJI Pocket 2 camera. I don't know, there's something about this little package, even when it's all buttoned up, that I have kind of fallen in love with. I mean, that goes right into my pocket. I don't have to worry about it. Or if I do want to put it in a bag, it doesn't take up much space. And even I have the ND filters. So even though they're small and can be kind of hard to deal with, this package takes up no space whatsoever. I can easily throw it into my bag or my pocket and not have to worry. And then I automatically have a camera to film with. So, like I said, the Pocket 2 is probably my favorite camera. Now, as I play around with the G9, that may change a little bit. For now, I think I'm going to stick with this one and the Pocket 2. Now, I did mention several times that these are pretty cheap options in comparison to a lot of cameras on the market, especially new ones. My personal preference, and I'm not sponsored in any way, shape, or form yet, but where I've gotten all of these cameras is mpb.com. There is a large selection, and that changes every day, but all of these have gotten very cheap on that website. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. If you really enjoyed it and want to see more content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe. But that is going to do it for me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.